It's July 17th. Most of Southern Ontario is looking to recover from the summer flood of 2024. We certainly hope that you're all safe and sound. This is the Sportsline Podcast here on CHCH. I'm Bubba O'Neil. Most of you know the drill, but for those that don't, we love talking about successful teams, athletes, executives, writers, even broadcasters who've made their mark in Southern Ontario. So let's get right down to business. This die-hard fan of the Ottawa Rough Riders was a writer at heart, and while mastering the art of journalism at Durham College, this fella accomplished a dream. That passion covering the ins and outs of the Canadian Football League, and for 35 years at the Canadian Press, Dan Rolfe has done so at a Hall of Fame level. As he likes to say, I have the best job ever. And after stints with the likes of the Georgetown Herald and the Halton Hills Independent on the way up, the journey, I presume, has all been worth it. Dan Rolfe, pleasure to have you in here for the Sportsline Podcast. Has it been all worth it?
Oh, hell yeah. I don't know what I'm going to do when I have to work for a living.
I know. And that's the best part for you and I both. Hey, you know, your expertise, obviously, the Canadian Football League. There's just so much going on right now. I felt like the need to talk to you, sort of, you know, whether it be good or bad about the league right now. You've covered it all for so long. So I kind of want to start here. I don't know if it was really a surprise. Maybe the timing was a surprise, but following a third straight walk-off loss, the Edmonton Elks fired Chris Jones. Surprised about the move?
Not the move, the timing, yeah. I would share that sentiment as well. I mean, the Elks are reportedly in talks with a new private owner. I kind of thought that was going to take precedence first, and then once that was resolved, then they would talk about the coaching situation. But you know what? You're 0-5 and you're 8-33 as a head coach. Bottom line is to win, and when you're not winning, that hot seat gets awful warm, and it can happen at any time. So, I wasn't surprised at the move. I was surprised more about the timing, but I mean, I get it.
You know, I don't understand this about Chris Jones. You look at his first stint, and as he had a first stint with Edmonton, well over 500, won a Grey Cup, seen as a defensive mastermind, and he kind of went for more money and a better opportunity at Saskatchewan, and then, you know, went to a high school in Pennsylvania. But what happened in his second stint?
It's a really good question. I'm looking at, I mean, the guy had 3 job titles in Edmonton, you know, head coach, GM, and defensive coordinator. And, you know, there was no question in my mind what you said regarding his defensive prowess. I mean, everywhere he went, his first 3 jobs, he won Grey Cups as a defensive line coach and defensive coordinator, and was innovative and was very, very, very good at that job. Maybe becoming, you know, having your fingers in 3 different pies, maybe that was a lot. I mean, as the head coach and GM, you're involved in personnel now, and instead of coaching the players that are given to you, you're now trying to, you know, find players who will fit into your system. And I don't know, maybe Chris Jones, the GM, is not as good as Chris Jones, the defensive coordinator. I just know that all the things that he did his first, you know, when he won his first 3 Grey Cups, I mean, he's a very good coach, and he didn't get dumb overnight. I'm guessing that, you know, the relative youth of the Edmonton roster, you know, maybe it's taken them a little longer to get acclimated to A, pro ball, B, to what Chris wants, and C, you know, understanding what the head coach and the defensive coordinator are looking for. I don't know. I just know that, you know, this current streak that they're on, they're 0-5. They've lost 5 games by a combined 20 points, the last 4 by 3 points, the last 3 by a walk-off field goal. So I don't think they're far. I don't think they're a bad football team. I don't think they're a very good football team to overcome the mistakes that they make to get to these points. And they make very, very crucial mistakes at bad points in football games, and it costs them.
You just said it. They make crucial errors at the wrong time, generally 2 plays before losing.
Yeah.
Is that the fault of the head coach? I mean, Boris Beattie, one of the most experienced, strongest kickers in the league, squibs a kick out of bounds. Ottawa get the ball at the 50-yard line, make one play, and then they kick a winning field goal. There was a face masking penalty in BC, which would cost them a victory. I mean, these are player-related mistakes. Why does the head coach have to pay for it?
Well, the head coach gets way too much credit when you win, and he gets way too much blame when you lose. You know what? Somebody's got to. It's easier to fire one coach than it is to get rid of, 43 players, and ultimately, the players are a reflection of the coach. I mean, if their players are disciplined, then your coach is preaches discipline. And I remember when Edmonton was in Toronto, and a crucial roughing the kicker penalty kept the Argo drive going, and it ultimately led to a 3-point Toronto win. And I mean, it's just those things that happen, and they seem to have, like you said, they seem to happen at the wrong time, and Edmonton's not good enough, quite frankly, to overcome those mistakes at crucial times. But yeah, I think I don't think Chris Jones was fired because of what happened against Ottawa on Sunday night. I think it was a cumulative effect, and they were 4-14 last year, and they were 4-14 the year before. So I just think now was the time, and whether you lose by 3 points, 1 point, or by 40 points, it shows up as 0-5 in the standings, and that's, quite frankly, that's not good enough, and they have to make a change because if Edmonton goes 0-6 this week, I mean, they're going to fall precariously close to not making the playoffs again, and they're already 6 points behind, or 4 points behind, I believe, third place in the West, and they can't. You got to stay within striking distance of that.
Here's a question that there's a lot of people in this area that are curious about. Was his reluctance to not play Trey Ford at quarterback an issue there? I mean, they went so far to go out and acquire a veteran arm and not develop another Canadian quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, at the time, I kind of, thought you had this young kid. He's Mr. Excitement. He gave you all your wins last year. To me, I thought he should have had the opportunity to compete for the starting job in training camp. He was the starter at the end of the year, and through no fault of his own, he opened training camp as the backup. Having said that, though, I mean, I get where Chris was coming from. I mean, he's a smart man. He knows that his job was to win football games immediately, and he figured that a veteran quarterback who's been part of 2 Grey Cup winning teams over 5 years in Canada gave him the best chance to do that. I guess the jury's out. You take a look; they're 0-5 right now, even though McLeod Bethel-Thompson, in my humble opinion, is not playing badly. He's not. I can't pin 5 losses on a quarterback who's got 9 touchdowns and 5 interceptions, and whose offense is averaging over 25 points a game. I pin it back to a defense that's giving up over 30 points of offensive points per game, and that's a tough hole to get for any offense to get out of. And so, you could question it, but I don't think McLeod Bethel-Thompson's play has a direct correlation to them being 0-5.
Final question on this point here. Jarius Jackson, the head coach, G. Roy Simon, the general manager. I don't know. They have the interim tag on them right now. I guess they're under the spotlight. I mean, you've been covering this league since the Rough Riders, right? You understand that the Edmonton franchise, then the Eskimos, were seen as the charter franchise of the Canadian Football League. Where do they go from here?
Well, I mean, I think if the silver lining to this cloud is both G. Roy Simon and Jarius Jackson have a lot of time to sort of show that they can do their respective jobs on a full-time basis. And, I mean, there's nowhere to go but up, quite frankly. And so both of them are auditioning for the full-time job, and, both have been patient to get to this point. It's not an ideal scenario for them to be in their respective positions, but such as life in pro football, and now it's their opportunity to show, that they have the mettle to lead a team and to make a team respectable. And so, they have they have 13 games, and if they get into the playoffs, they have a playoff game to show that they can put the pieces in place to getting the Elks back to that level that you talked about. And it wasn't that long ago where they were the model franchise of the Canadian Football League and were perennial contenders. But not since, they haven't been in the playoffs since 2019. So, and Jason Moss, I believe, was the head coach, and we'll see what he's done in Montreal now.
All right, to another executive move in the Canadian Football League, partially. Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment part ways with President Bill Manning. Like, I've talked to plenty of people, fans and backers of TFC. They're celebrating.
Really?
They could not stand Bill Manning. What effect, if any, will this move have on the Argonauts franchise?
I'm not thinking much this year. I mean, what I'm more interested in is that GM Mike Clemens will be reporting directly to Keith Pelly, who was a former president of the Toronto Argonauts and is now the head of MLSE. That to me is more intriguing because Keith Pelly knows what it takes to run a football organization, and I think he will be able to see what's going on and initially take a hands-off approach and see how things are going, and then be able to get involved and get roll up his sleeves and get involved with the Argos. Having said that, I don't think it's a stretch to suggest that the Argos are not a priority for MLSE. I think I don't think that you're going to see whole-scale changes during the remainder of this season, and I think he's going to take a hands-off approach. He also has to fix what's going on at TFC, and that organization is I would argue in much more dire situation than the Argos are. I mean, Toronto is a contender to reach the playoffs again, and I think they're in much better shape on the field with a football team I'm talking about than TFC is right now with on the Major League Soccer front. So I think he's got a lot on his plate. Keith Pelly does, and I think he's going to have to do a lot of watching and a lot of taking notes about how things are going, and then act accordingly. But I don't imagine Mr. Manning's departure will have a significant impact upon the day-to-day operations of the Toronto Argonauts.
Now, I don't know what his involvement is right now. I know he's listed as the general manager. I've heard other people say different things about Pinball Clemens and what his exact status is with the club. But is that not the best place for Pinball to be as the leader, the president of the Argonauts?
Well, that's where I'd put him. And I don't say that with any disrespect to his football acumen. Mm-hmm. But no, I think he would be a very good face of the franchise. I think he's someone that people can readily identify with and readily feel good about. That would be, to me, that would be the place to put him. I believe he was he not in a president's role or in a very executive's role beforehand once upon a time, and I think he would do well in that. Like I said, I'm not doubting Michael's football acumen. He played the game, he coached the game, and there's precious little he hasn't done. And but I in my mind, I would have moved him to president, and I would have put a guy like Vince Magri as my GM or my director of football ops or my vice president of football ops. Unfortunately for Vince, he's with the Buffalo Bills, but I have tremendous respect for Vince's football acumen and ability to grade talent, and he, in my mind, would have been someone that I put in that role. I remember when Chris Rossetti was in CFL ranks, there were people in CFL telling me that this guy was a bona fide GM candidate in the Canadian Football League, and obviously the NFL saw fit to hire him too. So those are two Canadian kids who I think would have been tailor-made to be GMs in this league. much like Neil McAvoy is in BC. The C in the CFL stands for Canadian, and those two guys would have been perfect fits up here, in my humble opinion. And hooray for the NFL, but not having one or both up here is a big loss in my opinion.
Well, I mean, look what's happened in Winnipeg with Walters. I mean, he's just done an unbelievable job for the better part of a decade. We'll come back to the Argonauts. Let's go to the 0-5 Tiger Cats, who, boy, that was a real, I'm sure you were right there on the 7th floor of Tim Hortons Field watching that debacle against the BC Lions. And it's hard to kind of get that game out of your mind, though the organization, the team, they've got to move on. They got to look at the film, as I said, look at the film and wipe the slate clean out there. Now, they made no moves during their most recent bye week. I don't know, does that surprise you? And is this winless start, at this point, because no moves were made at the coaching positions or defensive coordinator, as everyone's been rumored about, is this winless start more about the players and not the coaches?
Well, I mean, I'm looking at, you talked about the lack of movement on the coaching front. They've already done that. They made the change with the special teams coordinator. And, I'm not sure that there's much room under the coaching cap to make another move, to be honest with you. I think you want to show stability at the coaching ranks to sort of show the players that, you're staying the course and you're not panicking. Although at 0-5, there's certainly a sense of urgency because, you're falling further and further behind of a potential playoff spot, and you're losing games to division rivals, and that's not helping because you're losing ground and also season series in the event of a tie. But no, I'm not surprised with the lack of moves, to be quite honest. I'm not sure. I'll tell you, I wouldn't be messing with the offense. I'd like in this situation, much like to Edmonton, in that I think the offense is doing okay. I think it's doing its part. I just think Hamilton's defense has struggled. They're averaging over 30. Close to 30, if not over 30, offensive points against, and that's a tough thing to overcome for any offense. To tell them that you have to score 35 for us to be competitive in this game. That's a tall task. And I kind of figured there would be some growing pains on defense. I mean, Simone's retired, Jordan Williams retired. There's some departures as well. But I certainly didn't see this struggle coming, and I just think if they're going to have to get some stops, they're going to have to put the offense in good position to run the ball and run and control the ball, and B, put them in half the field to score some points every time they can get that opportunity. Because right now I see Hamilton's offense doing a lot of situations where they're moving the ball well, but they don't always finish with touchdowns, and that's crucial because you're worried about whether or not your defense can hold them.
And it's strange because you did talk about, as you talk about that defense, and you're right, the Williams departure was a shock. I mean, I think they were, looking to rely on him on being the guy in the middle. Yeah. Simone's thing was a bit of a surprise to many, at least on the outside of the locker room. And say what you want about Chris Edwards, bit of a problem sometimes, but a heck of a football player.
Yeah,
I still thought they replaced it. I thought they replaced it with good players. I mean, they virtually robbed the Argonauts of 3 or 4 defensive players. Yeah. I feel like they should be better, Dan.
No, I'm with you. I'm with you, and I can't put my finger on why. I like Chris Edwards. I'll be honest. I like Chris Edwards as a player. I just think sometimes the other stuff sort of tarnishes what he brings, right?
No doubt.
And I think he would have faced a suspension to start the season. So I'm not sure how much of an impact Chris, if they brought him back, how much he would have made to this team initially anyway. I mean, I liked the addition of Jamal Peters. I like some of the moves in the secondary, or some of the players in the secondary. I just, for whatever reason, it's not gelling. They're not. There's no consistency, it seems, and the defensive line. I mean, you lose. Ted Laurent retires. That's a presence, not only in the locker room, but the big man in the middle, right? And I've always liked Dylan Wynn. I know there were issues with his staying healthy, but when healthy, he gave you 150%. I liked that. But I mean, I'm not going to argue about Casey Sales. I think I mean, this guy is. He's fabulous, and I think that's a positive move there. And the two Argo defensive linemen, I think, have played, what little I've seen, have played well. But I don't know. I don't understand it. I don't get it. And as well as Hamilton's offense is playing, it's tough to win games when you're expected to stop 35 on the offensive scoreboard.
This is a tough thing for me to bring up here because it carries over a couple of years. A stat has been brought forward to me that blew my mind away, and I never really thought about it. Scott Milanovich has won, I believe, one out of his last 18 or 19 games. Does that mean anything?
I guess it has to mean something. It doesn't mean much to me because I've seen Scott win games in Toronto. I've seen, he's a very good coach. There's no doubt, if and or buts in my mind. And again, in this situation, he's also the offensive coordinator and play caller. And to me, I think the offense is in a decent place. I mean, I'm not going to argue about the play of Bo Levi Mitchell at quarterback. I'm not going to argue about the play of James Butler in the running game. I will argue consistency in the receiving core. But you know what? To me, this is a defensive situation, and if they can get that taken care of, even semi, then I think Hamilton is in games. And if you put the Ticats in a situation where in the fourth quarter they're maybe looking to either score a decisive touchdown or go ahead. I think that's a better mind frame than playing against BC and being down by a ton at halftime and being forced to play catch up, not by one or two touchdowns, but by multiple touchdowns. And every time you do make a move to come back and make it look like you're going to make this game interesting, the Lions do something offensively to take that momentum away, and you're now all of a sudden you're back to playing behind the really behind the eight ball and taking James Butler out of his comfort zone as a running back and making him your primary target in the passing game. So that to me is I'm not worried about Scott. He's a former coach of the year. He's won a Grey Cup. He's got experience in this league. I wouldn't worry too much about the head coach.
Well, perhaps the sight of the Argonauts in their own building will fire up this team. But with that said, Toronto really impressive in last week's dominant 37-18 win over the previously undefeated Alouettes. Yeah. And that's twice they've done that in Montreal over the year. The streaks started with a loss last year to the Alouettes, or at least a win over the Alouettes. Hey, are they the real beast of the East? I mean, they are the defending East. Well, I guess they're not the defending East champions, but they were 16-2 is what I'm trying to say last year, and look like the real beast of the East. But even at 3-2, are they really a team for the Tiger Cats to be worried about and concerned about?
Oh, heck yeah. I mean, I'll be honest, I think Hamilton has to worry about every team it plays. You don't have that luxury to look past anyone right now when you're 0-5. And this is a rivalry game, though. You and I have seen it. How many Labor Day games, Toronto come in and they're doing very, very well, and then they get to Ivor Wynn or now Tim Hortons, and all of a sudden the Ticats play like gangbusters and beat the Argos. I'm not sure I would say that Toronto's the beast in the East. To me, Montreal is the team to beat in the East, and they will be for the rest of the year. They're how they overcome the first loss of the year and coming back from a bye week, and maybe how to play without Cody Fajardo, depending on how that hamstring injury is. We'll see. But I mean, I think Toronto, in my mind, was always a solid second place team in the East, and they've not. And there's been nothing to alter that in my mind. I think Hamilton and Ottawa are going to fight for that third spot, and we'll see how that transpires. But in my mind, Toronto is firmly the number 2 team in the East, and if Hamilton wants to get back into the race, what better way to do that than to beat a rival at Tim Hortons Field?
They're 3-2, as we said, those Argonauts, and for the first 2 games of the regular season, we're talking about Cameron Dukes and as the quarterback replacing Chad Kelly, and everyone was saying, "Who needs Chad Kelly?" And then the next 2 games, there was a kind of mindset: when's Chad Kelly coming back? And then there's the big upset at Percival Molson. Where are we with Cameron Dukes right now as the quarterback leading this club?
In my mind, I'm still taking a wait and see. You know, they're 3-2. I mean, Chad's going to be gone a minimum of 9 games. So, I mean, we're roughly halfway through, you know, Chad being away from the football team and having to deal with those issues. I think the Argos are going to have a very interesting decision to make if all of a sudden they're 6-3, you know, when assuming that Chad is eligible to return after serving his 9-game suspension. You know, and I think they're going to take a wait and see attitude. And I know I am. I'm not even going to talk about, and no disrespect to Chad, but given the situation, he's not with the football team anymore. He's got other things to take care of. Let him take care of those, and life goes on in pro sport. I think they've shown when Cam can play within the system and gets the support of a very, very good running game, that offense is very, very good, very proficient. If and when they have to abandon the run and go to the pass to come back or to rally, then you know what? I think Cameron's a very good quarterback. I think he stays within the confines of the offense. I think he's very efficient. But he hasn't shown me that he's capable of consistently throwing 300 yards in that offense. And I'm not sure the offense needs him to throw 300 yards for it to be to click. What it needs is, you know, Kadeem Carey and Dante McMahon and Daniel Adder-Baboye to all 3 carry the load running the ball and you know, set up a situation where they're getting 4, 5, 6 yards of carry, and Cam can do you know, the sprint outs and do the short passing thing, or even run himself and keep the ball moving that way. You know, they've got good receivers. I'm not downplaying that, but I'm just not sure that the offense right now is set for him to, you know, to play bombs away and throw the ball downfield all game.
Well, I think from a Tiger Cat perspective, looking at the Argonauts, you have to give them respect. I mean, I remember in the preseason game talking to Mike Hogan, the broadcaster for the Argonauts in Guelph, and he said, you know what, there was a lot of losses. There was a lot of player losses that I've seen there for the Argonauts. Some, even guys like Curly Gittin Jr. Getting traded away. And he kind of said that, you know what, there's a bunch of guys that are coming up are going to fill those spots that are going to surprise you. And to be honest, they really, really, really have surprised me. But they put such a beating on the Tiger Cats last year. You were at all those games. They were painful at times looking at how good Toronto were against Hamilton. So let's hope for a real good game. I think the Tiger Cats, like, you may be right. Like, 0-6 to me, but there's a huge difference between 0-5 and 0-6. Am I wrong here?
No, I'm with you. I think 1-5 looks a lot better than 0-6, even though it's only a win. I just think a win against Toronto is always something to be celebrated in Hamilton, but a win against Toronto to stop a 5-game skid and get back into the all of a sudden you're only 4 points behind Toronto, and you've got 2 more games to play them, right? And I think that there is a sense of urgency in my mind, and you just 0-6, because it's like, what else? What else can go wrong, and what do we have to do? I think if you can get a win against Toronto at home, knowing that you have 2 more games against the Argos, then at least you've got something to hang your hat on and aim for, and say, look, we got 2 more games with Toronto, we win those, and then all of a sudden we win the seasons. We can win the season series and be tied, and now we can actually look at maybe catching Ottawa for second, if that's how that transpires, knowing that you still got a full complement of games against the Red Blacks as well. Interdivision games are important, but I also think when you're chasing those division teams, then those games take on a paramount importance in my mind.
Well, let's hope the donut box is rocking on Saturday night. And on that thought, attendance down in the CFL's most passionate markets. That's Hamilton and Regina, of all places. Yeah. Does this make any sense to you? Like, even through rough patches, there's always been fan support, but there seems to Regina's strange to me because they've gotten off to that 4-1 start.
There was a lot, but I do remember there was a lot of fan malaise regarding once the pandemic passed. Rider fans used to travel like from all over the province to come down and support their football team. And then you heard the stories about people talking, instead of making 9 trips down to Mosaic, I'm only going to make 5, or now I'm only going to make 3. And then there was, the last 2 years, the Riders finished their seasons losing 7 straight games and missing the playoffs and looking really bad doing it. I think they're 4-1 now. I like their head coach. He's pressing all the right buttons. They won a game with Shea Patterson as their starter. With Trevor Harris after he was hurt, and I think Trevor's going to come back sooner than later. I don't think you're going to see him gone the full 6 games, and that'll be something to really look forward to as well. Maybe if they can string a couple more wins together, then maybe the people will come. But as for Hamilton, I mean, I'm more surprised about that because Ticat fans, they support their team through thick and thin, and if attendance is starting to erode at Tim Hortons Field, that to me is a big concern because. There are no more passionate fans in Southern Ontario than Ticats fans, and if there's a relative malaise about the club at 0-5, I can only imagine what it's going to be if it goes to 0-6 or 0-7.
And Dan, I do work, do some work for the franchise as well too, and proud to do so. Do you think this is just a basic fact that somehow in a 9-team league, they have not won a Grey Cup since 1999?
Isn't that amazing? I keep reminding myself of that fact because sadly, I remember watching that game in Vancouver. You know what? I think that has something to do with it. I mean, you've had the Grey Cup twice at Tim Hortons Field, and and there was that gut-wrenching loss to Winnipeg in overtime. When the Ticats led going into the fourth quarter. I think that might have something to do with it, but I also think too 0-5, puts a real bad taste, and 1-6 looks 1-5 would look a lot better than 0-6 come the end of the weekend.
Well, I remember an old year back at the old barn where the team were 1-17, and at that point, I don't even want to go look. I mean, the Ivor win was like 14,000 or whatever it was at the time. Let's hope the team don't get back there. I mean, as you said, the passionate fans, the people that support their club, Hamilton, they deserve a winner. I believe I've said that for years upon years, and as you well know, when you visit that building, there's an energy about it, and to see it affected in any other way, I can't even go there to think about it, though.
No, but I mean, a transformation can happen quickly. I point to what's going on in Vancouver, both on and off the field, and to me, that's the ultimate success story. But that's a story that every franchise in the league can enjoy and can be a part of. So, and you know, it happens. Look at what happened in Montreal before last year, right? I mean, they were downtrodden and they had struggled, and you get on a nice roll, you get into the playoffs, and you win a Grey Cup, and all of a sudden there's a rejuvenation in the marketplace. So, I'm not suggesting that the Ticats are anywhere near that in terms of the state of the franchise. I'm just saying that it can turn around very, very quickly.
Well, let's hope so. Hey, you've been fabulous, Dan. Really appreciate your thoughts, your education about the league. It makes great listening to and watching from a standpoint of the information, the inside knowledge that you do have about the Canadian Football League. And you're a good guy on top of that as well, too.
Well, there are those that would beg to differ, but I appreciate the sentiment. Thank you. And always enjoyable to sit back and talk about a passion, and Canadian football is definitely my passion.
All right, Dan. Hope we can talk to you soon about that passion.
Me too. Be well and be safe.
All right. Thanks very much. Hey, folks, we love talking sports from a local, provincial, and national perspective. And if you do know of an athlete, team, or event to promote, the Sportsline Podcast want you. Please comment, hit that subscribe, like, and thumbs up button, and be sure to check out all the informative and entertaining podcasts CHCH have to offer. For the outstanding colleagues that make the Sportsline Podcast possible, thank you so very much. And be sure to check us out tomorrow.